You're listening to a bonus episode of The Dairy Edge featuring Teagasc's weekly Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, which is also available as a podcast.
So good morning, everyone. We're being joined by James Dunne, who's dairy advisor in County Monaghan, cabin man in County Monaghan now, as we figured out before we kicked off this morning. So I think, what's the localised situation and in Monaghan? And so you're going to explain to us that it differs across the county as well.
Yeah, well, look at thanks very much, James, for having me on. Yeah, grass growth has kicked off significantly in the last 7 days compared to what we've seen towards the latter half of May, early June. That's probably coming from higher levels of rainfall. I was just looking at the weather data, and I think in some places have got up to 80 mil of rain in total for June. So things are starting to correct itself in terms of growth. And as you rightly said, the county varies here, between north and south. Obviously, the more north you go, the more heavier soils you're getting into, whereas south, you're into, different soil type. And, the drought, obviously, or the lack of rainfall and drought situation affected them farms greater. And you've seen growth rates, over the last month drop down maybe as far as 30 kilos on them farms. Look, on average for the last 7 days, just pulled it off a little bit, anything from, high 60s to early 70s in terms of an average growth rate across farms. And like that, on the heavier soils, we've seen, that they're getting in excess of maybe 80, 90 on average. So, most notably, I suppose what we've seen, at the beginning of June, John expressed it there and said that the grass plant was getting stressed, and that post grazing yields were at the 1400 or below, and grass quality was it was poor. So there was no opportunity there to correct it. If you look at the post grazing height on a lot of these, on a lot of farms now, they're starting to approach 1700. So that'd suggest that there's an opportunity there to go in, take out these surpluses, and very quickly I think we can get farms back on track. I think there has been some level of correction done in the last week. If that continues now this week, you're setting yourself up well then for the month of July, I think.
Yeah. So really, it's not that different in terms of the big thing is correcting grass quality over the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely,
that's where it's at.
Yeah.
And it has, as you say, come out of a tough spring and then into a dry period. So there is a bit of work to be done on farms over the next few weeks. And that, just to touch on the fodder situation, where is that at within the region?
Yeah, funny, we completed a number of fodder budgets with clients over the last while. And look, as you said there, going back, let's just go back a step to last winter. I suppose there's a lot more cows housed in March, and a lot more days spent inside than people would have liked. So obviously reserves have been eaten into, and anyone that was carrying that bit of surplus from year to year, I'd say that surplus has come under pressure due to March past. So looking at what the silage is needed on farms, I think we're coming in there between what first cut was made and what small bit of reserve was left on farm. We've about 60% of our winter feed for the coming winter gathered up. Now the problem, as John said previously, is second cut silage is now anyone that cut early is probably all right, but those that cut at the start of that dry period, the plant has, moved to that reproductive stage. Maybe, fertilizer could have been delayed going out on them swards in some cases with the dry weather. I've seen that in some cases. So, that conversation has to be had. Do you reset and go again? Because, like I said, there's only 60% there. That's not taken into account a reserve, James. That 60% is what's needed for, based on the stock numbers is on the farm and based on your average winter period. So there's no 1 month reserve added to that. So look, there's the same again, you might say, that has to be required. Made and collected for these farms. Yeah.
And so you mentioned it there, I suppose, is the starting point, and I suppose I'm sure you're encouraging through the groups, really to get a fodder budget done over the next couple of weeks. Know where you're at. Is there an opportunity there too in terms of look at if you do need feed or identifying deficits that you go out and maybe get a bit of dry cow feed or something now? It's
Yeah, I think first of all, the fodder budget allows you to, before without having one, you're just guessing, and anyone that has maybe extra cow numbers or maybe less land or something like that this year, maybe the situation has changed from other years. Sitting down doing that fodder budget, 5-10 minutes will complete it. It's there on pasture base. It's a great tool. And it gives you your percentage in terms of what you have, or in days short or days extra. So very suddenly you can see what's in store. And as you say, if you're in that situation that you haven't enough, or your requirements aren't there, allows you maybe to go out if there is the opportunity to purchase some dry cow feed at the minute in terms of bales, or look. The other thing, we're at the beginning of July. I think hopefully we get good growth rates through July, and before we start thinking about building grass for the autumn time, there is that opportunity to take out more paddocks, correct grass as well, and with the hope of getting maybe maybe more quantity in our third cut.
Yeah, as you said, there's an opportunity there in terms of for farms maybe to identify and get a third cut squeezed in.
Yeah.
Right, we've heard a lot about grass so far, and the big thing is correction, I suppose. Breeding. How is it? I suppose how has it went, or what are you seeing on the ground? And has there been changes this breeding season to that differs from any other? I suppose.
Yeah, well, notably, I suppose if we go back to the springtime, what I would notice among clients is there obviously the number one bigger appetite is there's more appetite for the use of sex semen, but actually going back, there's actually more usage, I think, of sire advice, the sire advice program being used. I definitely see that year on year, and more detailed and more use of the extra functions as available within the sire advice program. And particularly sitting down when you go to sit down with a client now to use the sire advice, the first thing that's pulled out is the annual milk recording from the year previous, and cows are highlighted for either dairy breeding, beef breeding, let it be for culling, etc. So the two of them are working very well hand in hand, James. I definitely see the extra functions are being used, and that's leading on then to those giving lads confidence to use extra, to use more sex semen than they were previously. I know in some farms have gone all sex semen, which is leading on to a lot more selection on beef bulls, and using the dairy beef index, and sitting down and selecting your cows for beef breed, and selecting the bulls then that's going to be used, and having a selection of having a variety of bulls within breeds. I think that has been a big change, particularly in the last 18 months. Also, probably what you also see from this is that AI isn't lasting as long. On they're not doing as much AI in so in some cases you're seeing stock bulls being let out on week 5 and week 6. So that in itself poses a challenge in terms of bull power, and you definitely see more demand for stock bulls. More level of stock bulls on farms, and I think there is it's well highlighted at this stage that you need if you the earlier you go out with your stock bull, the more bull power you need, so the more bulls you need, from a herd size point of view, that can range from a minimum of 2 to definitely up to 4. So look, depending on herd size, obviously. So
yeah. So really, there, what you're I suppose the conversation around that is just to be careful, I suppose, you know, you're encouraging the AI for as long as you can, but just be mindful in terms of that.
Yeah, I think I think for those that have only AI'd for the short number of weeks, that there has to be a bigger emphasis on bull power. Whereas if you're AIing up to week 7 or 8, maybe look at the emphasis obviously still there for bull power, but you know, and I think sourcing these bulls early on in the year is crucial too. That you're not leaving that decision until the end of May or early June. I think having them there and having them settled is good.
As always, folks, you can post your questions if you have any questions for James. But I suppose 2 other things on the breeding side of things. Is the first one, finishing date. Is that a constant battle? Is that something is that one you're winning? Or how is that going?
Yeah.
I see you smiling here now. So
yeah, I think everybody knows their start date. The finish date is a problem at times, and there is times you go out to farms and towards the middle or end of July or even early August, and the stock bull is there, and you get the excuse that he broke out or something. So I think at this stage now, I think it has to be in everybody's mind. Well, right, I started on such a date, and pick your breeding season length, if it's 11, 12, 30, whatever it is, and go. What date does that bring you to? And that's the date that it has to stop, James. And think if you just look back maybe on April and May, and if you had any late calving cows, maybe the challenges they posed to you in terms of maybe if was there any difficulties with them, or the dragged out in terms of the calving season and labor and all the rest, and selling his calves. So look, I think you have to look back on that. Do I want that next year? And just say there has to be a cut off date when these bulls come out.
Yeah.
I suppose. You mentioned, just to go back, and you said what other look at probably a lot more use of synchronized programs on heifers. Just chatting to a few yesterday that maybe had done early scans or had been recording repeats or whatever. Yeah, look at a mixed mixed results, but generally speaking, some good conception rates to date, and some average enough. So, more usage of sync programs. But I feel when people get a couple of years under their belt of using the program, the more confident to become with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, on that tail end cows, ultimately, usually it's a very small number of cows.
Mm-hmm.
I would say every cow now is coming under question, given the circumstances and the value of each cow on farm. So really, those late calving cows. But I think I'm confident from being in Monaghan over the last few months that's one you're winning. Come here, the genotype program. Just to touch on it, actually, the national genotyping program. What's the feeling, or have you had group meetings since that has been released, or what's the conversation like?
Yeah, I'll be honest. It's probably the conversation has been slow, so to speak. Have had no kind of group interactions since the launch of it. But definitely, those that have pushed on in terms of breeding and use of particularly selective breeding going forward, you can see that a level of interest generating from clients on the program, and it'll be watch this space, I think.
Yep, very good. The last thing I want to touch base with you on, and I know you spoke at the National Dairy Conference last back end regarding costs and cost structure, and look, we've seen costs increase significantly, obviously, in 2022. They've carried into 2023, albeit they're easing now. But I suppose the conversation around that at farm level, milk price has dropped by 20 cent or in around 20 cent a litre. Is there a conversation happening? What's the thoughts at farm level?
There is, and I suppose you've seen a dramatic change within inside 12 months, and everybody's aware of that fact. And if you look back 2, the cost of production for last year, which hasn't really, as you say, significantly changed that much, particularly for the first half of the year. I see inputs, for the second half is going to be different. But you look at the average cost of production is somewhat ranging from, in anything from 35 to 37 cent for the average of my clients here in County Monaghan for last year. So, it has been raised and questions have been asked about the level of profitability for the year coming in. So look, there is that tool there, the Profit Monitor projection tool, and we've run that with 2 groups in June. And I suppose what we done was, we looked at first of all, we looked at our outputs, right, in terms of, and the big one there being milk. I suppose, it accounts for well over 90% of the income coming into the dairy farm. So look, we have reset that based on where the group felt it was going to sit for this year, keeping in mind, I suppose, that there was those early months when, milk prices were a wee bit higher than it is now. So we took that into position. We like, in terms of the our inputs in terms of meal and fertilizer. Obviously, we've seen them come back, but we readjusted them slightly. We increased the ESB, and we kind of inflated all other costs then, James, by about 5%. In running with national inflation. So, that's kind of what we done. We didn't go around and change a whole pile. We just went in, looked at the big ones, and then I suppose when you take look at the profit figure, but then take your drawings, household drawings, which varies among farms, repayments, and we look at tax. We're very much sitting at break even. The examples that we're doing, when we take in them 3 other cash costs, let's say, they are, farms are sitting at break even. So look, the question was asked at group meetings this month, what are you doing differently, or what are you doing this month that in terms of cost savings? Generally speaking, what came back, a lot of clients are looking at trying to improve their grass quality for, the latter half of 2023 to try and that was, leading on to maybe hoping to reduce meal fed, if they can increase the quality of grass. So we've spoken about that earlier on. So obviously, if that's done, a lot of farms can do that. A lot of clients saying that, they're watching everything that they're doing. There's no unnecessary spending. And
I was going to say that, James, is probably, you said to me that yesterday when we were talking, there's a lot less work probably going on at farm level this year in terms of.
Absolutely, and that's a matter of maybe just resetting yourself as well. For a lot of clients, they would have, with last year, there was a lot of good work done in terms of, drainage work, reseeding, labour saving devices, all that, and it's just a matter now of, if we were in that mindset for 12 months, we need to,
it's even maybe having a wee, isn't it? It's having a wee plan around that, and maybe. Yeah. Not doing as much out of cash flow as such. It's not to say that those things have to stop as such.
Absolutely, and funny, we asked that question: what are you doing to reduce costs? It was thrown in there that people are reseeding. They see that as a method of reducing costs going forward. So, I don't think you stop completely. Particularly jobs in terms of grazing infrastructure, grassland, etc. That can be looked at, and it can be, short-term finance can be used maybe to get you, if needed, if it want to be taken from cash flow. The other thing, I suppose, James, to lead on from that is that, you really need to be looking now at milk accordance and looking at cows, and we talked about late calving cows. We're at that level, where farms are at a break even. There is maybe possibly on some farms where cows maybe that aren't performing, high cell count, whatever, them cows are starting to become very questionable whether they should be there or not. You have a good cull cow price at the minute, so You know, and I
And
suppose,
the fodder situation too, James.
yes,
Into that
yeah,
as well.
and tomorrow's the last. Tomorrow's the last stage. We have 6 months done. We're going into the last 6 months of 2023. Everyone is probably, over the next couple of weeks, is probably going to receive the first interim nitrates report for 2023. That's going to be different for everybody, due to cow banding. If you're used to being at a certain figure at the midpoint of every year, that's going to be different. Okay, so I think as a recommendation, that would be to sit down and look at that, and that ties into the whole, marginal cow, let's call it, or cow, in terms of costs as well. That if these cows are adding to a nitrates problem, well then, now is the time maybe that'll you have time to correct it.
Yeah, very good. There's a question in there, and you've actually answered it from David. But that 35 to 37 cent that you mentioned, does that include own labour? So you've done the calculations over and above that. Yeah. It's different for every farm, and I suppose you've done that with your groups, I suppose.
Yes.
I suppose did they get a? The last question I'll ask on that is: did they get a surprise when they sat down and actually worked through that break-even cost?
Absolutely, yeah. Because I think sometimes, we're great at talking about the cost of production, but when we add those 3 other costs back in and look at the break-even, it can change the picture. It could change the picture very quick. So yeah, and it's not a laborious task. If you have your figures there from last year, you'll sit down and do this with a client in 15-20 minutes. So a good exercise to do at, particularly at the halfway point.
Yeah, very good. And I suppose that's use of the power of that, in terms of you have an awful lot of clients completing that profit monitor analysis. So it leaves it easy to do that. There's one other question, and I think we'll wrap up then, and I want to just a little chat around the Moore Park Open Day. For reseeds, I suppose, really the question here is if you're spraying off and you want to get a good kill, I suppose, of docks, what's your spray of choice? Is it Roundup is the question?
Yeah, and I suppose, yeah, right. It has to be right. And look, at going at a stage where I think you get the best response to Roundup when the grass plant is you're getting a high growth rate. So particularly anyone that's looking at reseeding now that didn't, maybe missed out on it for the last month due to, the grass growth being low and supply of grass being low, that now is the opportunity, if you're not looking at taking out surpluses, to go in and reseed and Roundup. Yes, yeah.
Very good. Look at James. I think it's always good to have advisors on. I appreciate your time. It's important to kind of get that local knowledge in terms of what's happening, what sort of conversations are being had. As you say, I suppose the big focus is grass. It's finishing the breeding season, and then you've had that conversation with your clients in terms of cost of production, but then for every farm, knowing your break-even costs. And making decisions based on those conversations is the key thing. So I appreciate your time this morning. Just for 2 minutes, folks, I just want to highlight the fact that the Moore Park 23 Open Day is on next Tuesday, Tuesday the 4th of July. Gates open at 8:30, but as always, it'll be running for the duration of the day. But do get in early in the fact that there's an awful lot to see. Just in terms of the actual theme, it's securing a sustainable future. And as always, there'll be a number of boards at the start, and you'll be fit to break out then and take the day as your leisure. But just in terms of some of the boards at the start, in terms of, I suppose, there'll be highlighting the challenges and what the challenges within the industry, what makes our systems profitable, and I suppose then the impact of, and some of it you touched on, James, in terms of breeding and genetics, grassland management, and I suppose the role that has to play, not only in the profitability of our systems, but also, I suppose, in terms of answering some of those challenges that will be highlighted. Then, obviously, There's a number of technology villages. I'm not going to list them all out, but there's 8 technology villages where there's going to be a suite of the research highlighted that's been done in those areas, along with displays, demonstrations. You heard John Marr earlier in terms of that grazing demo, clover demonstrations. All of those things will be highlighted. I suppose there's a couple of new elements which may interest people. There's actually there's an international discussion where there's actually going to be international researchers available to have a discussion on the research that's going on within their own countries, and I suppose how we can learn from that as well. A big one in terms of towards the end of the day is going to be that forum around the people challenge and the labour challenge, and sometimes that's often when we talk about the challenges, that's one maybe that is overlooked a little bit, but that's a very real challenge within the industry, and that's going to be discussed at the forum on the day. So I suppose all I will say is there's an awful lot there to see, folks. It's one day, so don't miss out. And I suppose Teagasc are inviting everybody, both farmers and industry representatives. Please do come down and join us on the day. We've no doubt that there'll be lots of good take-home messages. So I just wanted to highlight that. As I say, next Tuesday, the 4th of July, and gates open at 8:30. Next Thursday, then, we will have George Ramsbottom on talking about the new signpost advisory programme and what's actually available and how you might get involved in that. So thanks a million, folks. Thanks for joining in. Thanks again, James. And as always, folks, farm safely.
That's all for this week's bonus episode from the Let's Talk Dairy webinar series. And don't forget to look out for more bonus episodes each week. I'll be back with the usual Dairy Age podcast on Monday, so do listen in then. I'm Stuart Childs, and thanks for listening.